Imagine your worst Monday. You're soaking wet, dead broke, and late for an interview that could save you. You stumble into an elevator and meet a man who looks like a dangerous geological event in a bespoke suit. And the first thing you do is tell him his zipper is down. Now imagine that man is your new billionaire CEO, and he isn't just a corporate shark. He is an ancient alpha shifter king, and he's decided you are the only thing in the world that matters. Welcome to Chloe's life, where office romance means surviving blizzards, glowing eyes, and a boss who wants to devour you. Before we step into the storm, please like this video, subscribe to Linas Romantasy collection for more addictive tales, and comment below telling us where you are listening from today. Chapter 1. The Elevator. The universe had a specific vendetta against Chloe Bishop, and today, its weapon of choice was humidity. Chloe stood in the gleaming, marble-floored lobby of Gantry Capital, shaking out a violently orange umbrella that had inverted itself 3 times on the walk from the parking garage. Her hair, a dark, unruly cloud of curls she usually beat into submission with hairspray, was currently expanding at an alarming rate. "Please," she whispered to the elevator call button, stabbing it with a wet finger. "Just let me get upstairs before I look like a wet poodle." She was 20 minutes late. Her car, a rusted 2008 Honda Civic affectionately named the Heap, had decided to shudder and die at a red light, requiring a 10-minute pep talk and a prayer to the automotive gods to restart. Now she was wet, broke, and about to interview for a temp position she was woefully underqualified for. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Chloe rushed in, head down, wrestling her oversized thrift store sweater back onto her shoulder. "Hold the door!" she yelped, though no one was behind her. It was just a nervous habit, filling the silence before it could strangle her. She spun around and froze. She wasn't alone. Occupying the back corner of the elevator was a man. No, man felt like an insufficient word. He was a geological event in a bespoke suit. He was massive, broad enough that his shoulders seemed to brush the sides of the cabin. He wore charcoal gray wool that looked expensive enough to pay off her student loans, and he was staring at his phone with a boredom that bordered on hostility. Chloe pressed the button for the top floor, Executive Administration, and squeezed herself into the opposite corner, trying to make herself small. The elevator rose smoothly. The silence stretched. Chloe's brain, usually a hamster wheel of anxiety, began to spin. "Don't look at him. He's probably a VP. He probably fires people for breathing too loudly." She looked at him. She couldn't help it. There was a jagged silver scar running from just under his jaw down into the collar of his shirt. It was brutal, a stark contrast to the polished elegance of his suit. It made him look dangerous, like a brawler who had been forced into civility against his will. Her gaze traveled lower, taking in the cut of his jacket, the sharp press of his trousers, and... Oh no. Chloe blinked. She squinted. There, stark against the dark fabric of his trousers, was the glint of metal teeth. A patch of white shirt was visible through the gap. His fly was down, all the way down. Panic seized her. Do I say something? If she didn't, he'd walk out into a meeting, exposing his linens to the board of directors. If she did, she might die of embarrassment. The elevator pinged, signaling they were passing the 41st floor. The silence was deafening. Chloe's filter, notoriously faulty when she was nervous, short-circuited. "Drafty in here," she blurted out, her voice squeaking. "Or are you just happy to see me?" She clamped a hand over her mouth instantly. Why? Why am I like this? The man slowly lowered his phone. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked focused. He turned his head, locking eyes with her. His eyes were a startling, intense gray, like a storm front moving in over Lake Michigan. He looked her up and down, taking in the wet sweater, the frizzy hair, the violently orange umbrella dripping on his Italian leather shoes. Then, the corner of his mouth ticked up. It wasn't a smile. It was a smirk that carried a warning label. "You have a sharp tongue for someone so small," he murmured. His voice was a low rumble, a baritone that vibrated in the floorboards. Chloe pointed a shaking finger toward his waist. "Your, the barn door. The eagle has landed. Your zipper." He glanced down. He didn't flinch. He looked back up at her, the smirk deepening, his eyes narrowing, as if he were trying to solve a complex math problem written on her face. He took a slow step toward her. The air in the elevator suddenly felt heavy, charged with ozone, like the moments before a lightning strike. "Well," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper that made the hair on her arm stand up. "Want to close it for me?" The elevator chimed. Ping! Floor 50. The door slid open. Chloe didn't answer. She made a noise that sounded like a dying kettle and bolted. She rushed out of the elevator, nearly tripping over her own feet, desperate to put distance between herself and the most mortifying interaction of her life. She skidded to a halt at the reception desk, breathless. "Hi, Chloe Bishop, here for the temp interview." The receptionist, a woman with a headset and a look of permanent exhaustion, didn't look up. "Have a seat. The CEO is just arriving." "CEO?" Chloe asked, a cold pit forming in her stomach. "Mr. Gantry, Roman Gantry." Behind her, the elevator doors chimed again. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed on the marble. "Good morning, Mr. Gantry," the receptionist chirped, finally looking alive. Chloe turned, terrified. The man from the elevator walked past her. He didn't look at the receptionist. He looked right at Chloe. He reached down, casually zipped up his fly without breaking eye contact, and winked. "Send Miss Bishop into my office," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Now." Chapter 2. The Aftermath. Chloe Bishop was going to be fired before she was even hired. She was going to be blacklisted from every office building in Chicago. She would have to live in the heap and eat cat food with Mr. Biscuits. She sat in the plush leather chair across from the massive mahogany desk, her hands gripping her knees so hard her knuckles were white. The office was cavernous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the gray skyline, but the room felt dark, dominated by the man sitting behind the desk. Roman Gantry hadn't said a word for 3 minutes. He was reading her resume. Or at least, he was pretending to. Every few seconds, she heard him inhale deeply, a subtle flare of his nostrils, as if he were trying to smell the ink on the paper. "You have a degree in art history," he stated, not looking up. "It's very useful for trivia nights," Chloe stammered. "And waiting tables. I'm excellent at multitasking. Once, I carried 4 plates of nachos and a pitcher of beer without spilling a drop." "Shut up, Chloe. Stop talking!" Roman finally looked up. Up close, the scar on his neck was even more intimidating. It looked old and violent. He placed the resume on the desk with a deliberate slowness. "You are unqualified for this position, Miss Bishop. This is a high-frequency trading firm. The stress levels here break people who are far more prepared than you." "I know," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry about the elevator. I have a nervous disorder. Not a medical one, just a personality one. I'll leave." She started to stand. "Sit," Roman said. It wasn't a shout, it was barely a whisper, but the command hit her like a physical weight on her shoulders. Her knees unlocked instantly, and she dropped back into the chair with a thump. She blinked, confused. "Why did I do that?" Roman looked pained. He rubbed a hand over his face, snapping a heavy brass fountain pen in half with a loud crack. Ink splattered onto his fingers. He didn't seem to notice. "You stay," he gritted out, staring at the broken pen. "You're hired." What?" "You're hired. Executive assistant. You report directly to me, no one else." "But you just said I was unqualified." "You are," Roman said, wiping the ink from his hand with a handkerchief he produced from nowhere. "But you're also." He paused, looking at her with that strange, storm-gray intensity. He took another deep breath, his eyes dilating slightly. "Observant. You noticed the zipper. Most people are too terrified to look at me below the neck." "I was looking at your shoes," Chloe corrected automatically, then winced. Thank you?" The office door banged open. A man in a sleek blue suit stormed in. He had slicked back hair and the energy of a man who consumed nothing but espresso and ambition. "Roman, we have a problem with the Tokyo accounts," the man barked, ignoring Chloe. The margins are slipping.
And if we don't, he stopped, seeing Chloe. He sneered. Who is this? Housekeeping? Tell her to leave.
Chloe shrank into her oversized sweater. I was just... A low, vibrating sound filled the room. It was deep, guttural, like a large dog growling at a mailman, but it seemed to come from the chest of the CEO. Roman stood up. He moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. In a blink, he was around the desk, towering over the intruder. Careful, Marcus, Roman said softly. The growl was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly calm. Ms. Bishop is my new executive assistant. You will speak to her with respect, or you will find yourself working in a cubicle in the basement. Do you understand? Marcus paled. He took a step back, looking genuinely terrified. Yes, of course, sorry. Apologize to her. Marcus looked at Chloe. Sorry, Miss Bishop. It's fine, Chloe squeaked. I look like a damp mop today, I get it. Roman turned to her. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her pulse point, visible just above the collar of her sweater. He looked like he was restraining himself from doing something violent. Go to HR on the 4th floor, he told her, his voice tight. Get your badge. Come back immediately. Do not stop to talk to anyone. Okay, Chloe whispered. She grabbed her bag and scurried out. As the door closed, she heard a sound from inside the office, a heavy thud, like a fist hitting a solid oak desk, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Chapter 3. The Office Setup. By noon, Chloe had moved her meager belongings into the workspace directly outside Roman's office. Except, outside wasn't quite right. Roman had called maintenance and demanded they move her desk inside his office. It's for efficiency, he had claimed, looming over the two terrified maintenance guys as they lugged her heavy oak desk into the corner of his sanctuary. Now, Chloe sat in the corner, trying to look busy. The dynamic was excruciating. Roman worked in silence, signing documents, typing on his laptop, and occasionally staring at her. It wasn't a glance, it was a stare. Every time she shifted in her chair, every time she tapped her pen, he watched. It felt like being in a cage with a tiger that had decided to tolerate her presence for reasons she couldn't fathom. Is the temperature adequate? Roman asked suddenly, breaking an hour of silence. Chloe jumped. What? The temperature. You're wearing 3 layers. Are you cold? Oh, no, this is just my armor, she said, gesturing to her sweater. It keeps the demons out, and it hides the coffee stain on my shirt underneath. Roman didn't laugh. He frowned, considering this seriously. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Building maintenance? Raise the ambient temperature on floor 50 by 4 degrees. Yes, I know what the building standard is. I don't care. Just do it. He hung up. You didn't have to do that, Chloe said. I'm fine. You were shivering, Roman said, returning to his paperwork. It was distracting. Chloe looked at her hands. She hadn't realized she was shivering. The adrenaline of the morning was wearing off, leaving her exhausted. She looked around the office. It was stark, cold, and impersonal. No photos, no plants, just leather, glass, and steel. Do you have a family, Mr. Gantry? She asked, then clamped her mouth shut. Stop asking personal questions. Roman paused. The fountain pen in his hand froze. I have a father. He is retired. That's nice. Does he visit? He prefers plants to people. He thinks I work in a soulless glass coffin. Chloe snorted. She couldn't help it. He sounds fun. My cat, Mr. Biscuits, thinks I work in a prison because I leave him alone for 8 hours a day. He revenge pees on my bath mat. Roman turned his chair fully toward her. He rested his elbows on his knees, leaning forward. You have a cat? Yes, he has one eye and a very distinct hatred for the male species. He's my roommate. A roommate? Roman repeated, testing the word. He seemed relieved. So you live alone? With Mr. Biscuits, and a mountain of debt. Why? Security clearance, Roman said quickly, turning back to his computer. Standard questions. Chloe sighed and started organizing the pile of files he had dumped on her desk. They were a mess. Chaos. It didn't match his pristine suit. She started color-coding them with sticky notes she found in her bag. As she worked, the silence in the room shifted. It stopped feeling predatory and started feeling heavy, warm. She looked up. Roman was watching her hands sorting the files. He looked exhausted. The circles under his eyes were dark bruises. "You should eat," she said without thinking. "You look like you're running on fumes." Roman's head snapped up. His eyes flashed with something dangerous. Hunger, maybe. "I'll order lunch," he said. Chapter 4. The Feeding. 20 minutes later, a delivery team, not a guy with a bag but a team, arrived pushing a cart covered in silver cloches. Chloe stared as they laid out a spread on the coffee table in the center of the office. There were 3 different types of steak: rare, very rare, and basically still mooing. A mountain of roasted vegetables, truffle mashed potatoes, and a salmon fillet the size of a skateboard. "Mr. Gantry," Chloe said, standing up, "are we expecting the board?" "No," Roman said. He dismissed the waiters with a wave of his hand. "Sit. Eat." "I can't eat this. This costs more than my car." Roman ripped off his suit jacket, tossing it onto the couch. Beneath his white dress shirt, his muscles were coiled tight. He loosened his tie, looking agitated. "It's a write-off," he lied smoothly. "If we don't eat it, it goes in the trash. I hate waste. Sit." Chloe hesitated. Her stomach chose that moment to let out a roar that echoed in the quiet office. She flushed crimson. She hadn't eaten breakfast because she was out of milk. Roman's eyes darkened. He pulled a chair out for her. "Chloe, please." It was the first time he had used her first name. It sounded like a prayer. She sat. She took a small serving of potatoes. "Protein," Roman commanded, skewering a massive steak and dropping it onto her plate. "You're anemic. I can smell the iron deficiency." "You can smell my blood count?" Chloe laughed nervously, cutting into the steak. "That's a new one. Is that an Alpha CEO superpower?" Roman froze. Something like that. She took a bite. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. She let out a small, involuntary hum of pleasure. Across the table, Roman stopped breathing. He watched her chew. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. He wasn't eating. He was just watching her eat, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard the wood creaked audibly. "Aren't you hungry?" Chloe asked, feeling self-conscious. "I'm fine." Roman rasped. He looked like he was in pain. He grabbed a raw steak with his bare hand. Chloe blinked, sure she imagined that. No, he used a fork. He shoved a piece of meat into his mouth and swallowed it, barely chewed. "You act like you've never seen a woman eat potatoes before." Chloe muttered. "I haven't," Roman said, his voice low and rough. "Not like this." "Like what?" "Like you're alive." The air in the room grew thick again. Chloe put her fork down. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. This wasn't normal. Bosses didn't look at their assistants like they wanted to devour them. "I should get back to work," she whispered. "Finish the steak," Roman ordered, but he stood up and walked to the window, putting the width of the room between them, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Chapter 5. The Static. By 4 p.m., the tension in the office was a physical thing. It felt like walking through a magnetic field. Every time Chloe moved, Roman flinched. She needed to get him to sign the employment contract HR had sent up. She had been putting it off for an hour, afraid to approach his desk. "Just rip the Band-Aid off," she muttered to herself. She stood up, grabbing the folder. She walked over to his massive desk. Roman was typing furiously, his jaw clenched tight. "Mr. Gantry, I need your signature on the NDA and the contract." He didn't look up. He extended his hand, palm open, without stopping his typing with the other hand. Chloe reached out to place the folder in his hand. She miscalculated. Her fingertips brushed against his palm. Crack! It wasn't a spark. It was a gunshot of electricity. A visible arc of blue light snapped between their skin. The force of it knocked Chloe's hand back. At the same instant, the large monitor on Roman's desk sparked, popped loudly, and went black. Smoke curled from the back of the screen. Ow! Chloe yelped, clutching her hand. It tingled, hot and numb, all the way up to her elbow. What the hell is wrong with the wiring in this place? She looked at Roman. He wasn't looking at the broken computer. He was staring at his own hand, looking horrified and ecstatic. His chest was heaving. Did you feel that? He whispered. Feel it? I think I just got electrocuted. You need to call maintenance. That's a hazard. I could have died. Roman looked up at her. His eyes were wild. The gray was gone, swallowed by a ring of glowing gold around his pupils. You didn't die, he said, his voice sounding distorted, deeper than before. You're strong. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward. He backed away from her, putting the desk between them as a barrier. Mr. Gantry, are you okay? Chloe took a step forward. Don't. Roman held up a hand. Don't come closer. The static. It's too much. It's just carpet shock, sir. I can get some anti-static spray. It's not the carpet! Roman roared. The sound vibrated in Chloe's teeth. He grabbed his briefcase. He looked like a man fleeing a crime scene. I have to go, he said, breathless. Cancel my meetings. Go home, Chloe. Go home and lock your door. Lock my door? Why? Just do it! He stormed out of the office, slamming the heavy door so hard the glass walls rattled. Chloe stood alone in the silence, clutching her tingling hand. The smell of ozone and burnt electronics filled the air. Okay, she whispered to the empty room. This job is definitely weird. She looked at the contract on the desk. He hadn't signed it, but right where her hand had touched the paper, the edges were singed black. Chapter 6. The Advisor. Roman Gantry did not drive like a CEO. He drove like a man outrunning a nuclear detonation. His vintage Land Rover Defender tore up the gravel driveway of a modest, secluded farmhouse 40 minutes outside the city, fishtailing slightly before skidding to a halt near a rusted Ford pickup truck. He kicked the door open and stormed out. He had left his suit jacket back at the office. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, clinging to him with sweat, and his tie hung loose around his neck like a noose he'd failed to tighten. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with an overload of energy that felt like he had swallowed a live power line. Dad! Roman roared, the sound cracking halfway into a growl. Where are you? He bypassed the front door and stalked around to the large, glass-walled greenhouse in the backyard. Inside the steamy, heated glass structure, violently pruning a blooming rosebush, was Arthur Gantry. The former alpha of the Greystone pack looked nothing like a billionaire heir. He wore a grease-stained cardigan that had seen at least 3 decades of wear, baggy cargo pants, and a faded fisherman's cap. He didn't look up as Roman approached, breathing like a freight train. You're stepping on my petunias. Arthur grunted, snipping a dead head off a yellow rose. Move your big feet. I found her, Roman gasped, leaning against the wooden trellis, trying to ground himself. The smell of wet earth and his father's familiar, dusty scent helped settle the wolf pacing inside his chest. I found my anchor. Arthur paused. The shears stilled. He slowly stood up, his knees popping audibly. He wiped his dirty hands on his pants and looked his son up and down, taking in the wild eyes, the dilated pupils, and the faint scent of ozone clinging to Roman's skin. Well, Arthur said, his voice gravelly and unimpressed. It's about damn time. You were starting to get twitchy. Who is she? A shifter? A diplomat? She's a temp, Roman said, dragging a hand through his hair. She's human, Dad. Completely, fragilely human. And she thinks I'm insane. Arthur snorted, bending down to pick up his trimmings. To be fair, you are insane. Did you scare her? I think I electrocuted her. Roman admitted, staring at his palms. I went to sign a contract. Our hands touched. It blew out the monitor on my desk. I panicked and ran. Arthur sighed, a long, suffering sound. He walked over to a patio table where a half-finished model ship sat inside a large glass bottle. He picked up a pair of tweezers. So, let me get this straight. Arthur muttered, carefully adjusting a tiny rigging line inside the bottle. You met your fated mate. You zapped her with biostatic because your self-control is garbage, and then you fled the scene like a criminal, leaving her alone in your office. I couldn't stay, Roman argued, pacing the length of the patio. My eyes were shifting. If I stayed, I would have claimed her right there on the carpet. She doesn't know what we are. The veil, Dad. I can't break the veil. You idiot, Arthur said affectionately. You're treating this like a hostile takeover. You're stalking her. You're sniffing her like a bloodhound. Stop it. I can't help it. Her scent. It's vanilla and rain. It makes me want to tear the world apart just to build a fortress around her. Arthur set the tweezers down and turned to face his son. His expression hardened, the old alpha authority flashing in his eyes for a second. Listen to me, Roman. She is not a conquest. She is a woman. A human woman. They don't respond to growling and intensity. They respond to safety, consistency. Arthur poked Roman hard in the chest with a calloused finger. Woo her. Don't hunt her. Feed her. Humans love food. Listen to her. And for the love of the moon, buy her a new computer if you fried the old one. Roman exhaled, the tension finally beginning to drain from his shoulders. Woo her, he repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign. How? Start by going back, Arthur said, picking up his watering can. It's going to storm tonight. Thunder makes you agitated. It makes humans scared. Go be useful. Chapter 7. The Late Night. Chloe was still in the office at 8 p.m. She wasn't working anymore. She was sitting in the break room, clutching a lukewarm mug of tea, staring out the window at the apocalypse unfolding over Chicago. The sky had turned a bruised shade of purple. Lightning forked across the lake, followed by thunder that shook the glass walls of the skyscraper. Every time the thunder boomed, Chloe flinched, curling tighter into her oversized sweater. Stupid storm, she muttered, rubbing her right hand. The numbness from the static shock had faded, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in her fingertips. She had spent the last 3 hours cleaning up the office, scrubbing ink off the floor where Roman had snapped his pen, and hiding the singed contract in her drawer so the cleaning crew wouldn't ask questions. A massive crack of thunder rattled the coffee mugs in the cupboard. The lights in a break room flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Great, Chloe squeaked. Just great. This is how horror movies start. She fumbled for her phone to use the flashlight, but a sound stopped her. Footsteps. They weren't the clicking heels of the cleaning crew. They were heavy, silent, and deliberate. They were moving toward the break room. Chloe held her breath, pressing herself back against the counter. A silhouette filled the doorway. It was huge, blocking out the faint ambient light from the hallway. Chloe? The voice was low, vibrating through the dark room. Mr. Gantry? Chloe let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. You came back. Roman stepped into the room. He didn't turn on a flashlight. He moved through the dark with eerie confidence, navigating the tables and chairs without stumbling. He stopped a few feet away from her. I forgot my jacket, he lied. His voice was rougher than usual, strained. Another peal of thunder ripped through the sky, louder than the last. Chloe gasped, dropping her mug. It shattered on the floor. She flinched, waiting for the reprimand. Instead, Roman moved. He was suddenly there, standing between her and the window, blocking the view of the lightning. He didn't touch her. He stood like a sentinel, his back to the storm, facing her. It's just noise, Roman said softly. The structure of this building is reinforced steel. It cannot hurt you. I know, Chloe whispered, hugging her arms. I don't like loud noises. Childhood thing. Roman made a sound deep in his chest. It wasn't a word. It was a low, rhythmic rumble. It sounded like a large cat purring, but deeper. A subvocal vibration that she could feel in her own chest. Strangely, it didn't scare her. It felt grounding. The sound seemed to wrap around her, pushing back the fear. You're humming, Chloe noted, confused. Roman stopped abruptly. I am not, You were. It sounded like a generator. I have a resonant chest cavity, Roman said stiffly. It happens when I breathe deeply. He reached into his pocket. He was wearing his suit jacket again, she noticed, and pulled out a small velvet box. Here, he said, thrusting it at her in the dark. What is this? Severance pay? Open it. Chloe carefully opened the box. Inside, resting on white satin, was a tube of high-end burn cream. For your hand, Roman said. I noticed you rubbing it. The static. It can be irritating. Chloe stared at the cream. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't cash. It was exactly what she needed. Thank you, she whispered, looking up at his shadowed face. That's actually really thoughtful. Come, Roman said, turning toward the door. The power is out. I'm driving you home. My car has heated seats, and, he added, as if it were the most important detail, it is heavy. The wind won't shake it. Chapter 8. The Proposition. The next morning the sun was blindingly bright, bouncing off the snow that had fallen after the storm. Chloe arrived at work wearing sunglasses and carrying a large coffee, her hands slathered in the expensive cream Roman had given her. When she walked into the office, Roman was already at his desk. He looked different today. The frantic energy from yesterday was gone, replaced by a laser-focused intensity. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. Good morning, he said, not looking up from his laptop. Pack a bag. Chloe stopped mid-sip. Excuse me? Pack a bag, Roman repeated, finally looking at her. His eyes were clear gray today, calm and calculating. We are leaving at noon. Leaving? To go where? I have a dentist appointment on Thursday and Mr. Biscuits has a vet checkup for his glaucoma. Cancel them, Roman said, waving a hand dismissively. We're going to the Greystone Estate. It's a property I own north of the city. We have quarterly reports to finalize, and the distractions in this office. He glared at the new computer monitor maintenance had installed. Are counterproductive. Chloe laughed incredulously. Mr. Gantry, I can't just leave town with you. I'm a temp. I have a life. I have a cat who requires a very specific brand of wet food. Roman leaned back in his chair. He tented his fingers, watching her. This was the predator setting a trap. It's a 3-day trip, he said calmly. I will pay you triple your hourly rate for 24 hours a day, regardless of whether you are working or sleeping. Chloe froze. She did the mental math instantly. Triple time, 24 hours a day. 3 days. That was enough to pay off the interest on her student loans and fix a transmission on the heap. It was an obscene amount of money. And, Roman added, seeing her resolve waver, you can bring the cat. The estate is pet-friendly. Chloe narrowed her eyes. Mr. Biscuits is not pet-friendly. He is a menace. He sharpens his claws on expensive leather. I have plenty of leather, Roman said dryly. He can destroy whatever he likes. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just outside her personal space. He smelled like expensive soap and pine. I need you on this trip, Chloe, he said, his voice dropping to that persuasive velvety register. I can't organize these files alone. You're the only one who understands my filing system. His filing system was non-existent. She was the one who had created it yesterday. Triple overtime? She verified. And a per diem for food. Chloe sighed, defeated by capitalism. Fine, but if Mr. Biscuits eats your curtains, I'm not paying for them. Roman's mouth ticked up in that ghost of a smirk. Deal. Chapter 9. The Drive. The drive north took 3 hours. Roman's Land Rover Defender was a beast of a vehicle, all black matte steel and aggressive tires. The interior smelt like leather and Roman. Chloe sat in a passenger seat, gripping the handle above the door. Mr. Biscuits was in his carrier in the back seat, letting out a mournful yowl every 4 minutes like a clockwork siren. He hates cars, Chloe explained apologetically. He thinks we're going to the vet to steal his remaining eye. Roman glanced in the rearview mirror, eyeing the cat carrier warily. He has spirit. I respect that. The further north they drove, the worse the weather got. The clear skies of the city gave way to a heavy gray blanket of clouds. Snow began to fall, thick, wet flakes that stuck to the windshield. The road wound up into the mountains, becoming narrower and icier. Roman drove with one hand on the wheel, looking relaxed, while Chloe hyperventilated quietly. "We're going a little fast, aren't we?" she squeaked as they took a hairpin turn. "The vehicle has four-wheel drive and studded tires," Roman said calmly. "You are safe." As if to mock him, the universe intervened. They rounded a bend and a massive deer, an elk maybe, leapt onto the road directly in front of them. Chloe screamed. There was no time to brake. They were going to hit it. But Roman didn't slam on the brakes. He didn't brace for impact. Instead, his arm moved. It was a blur. Chloe didn't even see him turn the wheel. One second they were heading straight for the elk. The next, the entire 2-ton vehicle snapped sideways in a physics-defying drift. The SUV slid perfectly around the animal, missing it by inches, and then, with another blur of motion, Roman snapped the wheel back. The Land Rover straightened out instantly, continuing down the road as if nothing had happened. Chloe sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Roman. He hadn't even blinked. His pulse point wasn't jumping. He looked bored. "How?" Chloe rasped. "How did you do that? You moved the wheel before I even saw the deer." Roman tightened his grip on the leather steering wheel. The leather creaked under the pressure. "Adrenaline," he said, his voice tight. "That wasn't adrenaline, Roman. That was fast and furious levels of impossible. You moved faster than humanly possible." "I took advanced driving courses." Roman lied, keeping his eyes fixed on the road. "Tactical evasion. It becomes muscle memory." Chloe stared at him, suspicion warring with relief. She looked at his hands, large, capable, and terrifyingly strong. "Tactical evasion," she repeated slowly. "Right, because accountants need that." "I am a CEO," Roman corrected. "I have enemies. Hostile takeovers can be literal." He turned up the radio, effectively ending the conversation. But Chloe watched him out of the corner of her eye for the rest of the trip, her hand resting protectively on the cat carrier. Chapter 10, The Cabin. The estate was less of a house and more of a fortress made of timber and stone. It sat on the edge of a frozen lake, surrounded by dense, dark pine forest. It was beautiful, but isolated. Roman parked the Land Rover in front of the massive double doors. The snow was falling heavily now, a white curtain that walled them in. "Welcome to Greystone," Roman said, cutting the engine. They grabbed the bags. Chloe hauled Mr. Biscuit's carrier, refusing Roman's help. Inside, the cabin was freezing. Their breath misted in the air. "It's cold," Chloe said, shivering instantly. Roman frowned. He walked over to a digital thermostat on the wall and tapped it. The screen remained blank. "The storm must have knocked out the power to the main grid," he said, sounding genuinely annoyed. "We're running on the backup generator, but it only powers the essentials." "Essentials like heat?" Chloe asked hopefully. "Essentials like the security system and the refrigerator," Roman clarified. "The heating system in the guest wing is electric. It won't work." He turned to look at her. The large stone fireplace in the center of the main living room was dark. "The only room with a wood-burning stove is the master suite," Roman said. He looked pained to admit it. "And the main hearth here." Chloe looked around the cavernous living room. "Okay, so I sleep on the couch near the fire?" "Absolutely not," Roman snapped. "The couch offers no insulation. The temperature will drop to -10 tonight. You'll freeze." "So what do you suggest? We huddle for warmth like penguins." Roman's jaw worked. He looked away, staring at the unlit logs in the fireplace. "You will take the master suite," he said gruffly. "It has the stove and a bed with thermal duvets. I will sleep out here." "On the floor?" "Roman, you're the size of a door frame. You can't sleep on the rug." "I have a high tolerance for cold," he muttered. "Take the cat. Go to the room. I'll bring wood." An hour later, Chloe was ensconced in the master bedroom. It was rustic but luxurious, dominated by a bed large enough to sleep a family of 4. A cast-iron stove crackled in the corner, radiating heat. She cracked the door open. In the living room, Roman was lying on a bearskin rug in front of the main fire. He was lying on his back, one arm thrown over his eyes. He had discarded his shirt. Chloe's breath hitched. His back was a landscape of muscle, broad, defined, and scarred. The firelight danced over his skin, highlighting the sheer power of his frame. He didn't look cold. He looked like he was burning up. As if sensing her eyes, Roman tensed. He didn't move his arm. "Go to sleep, Chloe," he commanded, his voice rough and strained. "Lock the door." "Why?" "Because," he whispered, a tremor running through his body as the scent of her vanilla shampoo drifted out of the room. "I sleepwalk." Chloe didn't ask questions. She closed the door and locked it, but as she curled up in the massive bed, Mr. Biscuits purring nervously beside her, she couldn't shake the image of Roman on the floor, a king, sleeping like a guard dog at her gate. Chapter 11. Domesticity. Chloe woke up to the smell of wood smoke and the sensation of a furry weight pressing against her diaphragm. Mr. Biscuits was sleeping on her chest, purring with the rattling intensity of a broken diesel engine. She blinked, disoriented. The ceiling was timber, the duvet was thick enough to suffocate a small mammal, and outside the window, the world had been erased by a wall of white. "Right," she rasped, pushing the cat off. The cabin, the billionaire, the blizzard. She dragged herself out of the massive bed. The master suite was toasty, thanks to the cast-iron stove, but the moment she opened the bedroom door, the cold air of the main cabin hit her like a physical slap. She tiptoed into the living room, wrapping her oversized sweater tighter around herself. Roman was gone. The bearskin rug where he had slept was empty, though an indentation remained in the fur. "Mr. Gantry?" she called out softly. A clatter came from the kitchen area. Chloe followed the sound. She found Roman standing in front of the stove. He was wearing his suit trousers, barefoot, and, thankfully, a charcoal gray t-shirt that strained across his shoulders in a way that should have been illegal. He was staring at a frying pan with the same intensity he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. "I'm attempting coffee," he said without turning around. "The machine is complex. It requires pods." "It's a Keurig, Roman. It's not nuclear physics." Chloe walked over, gently nudging him aside. The heat coming off his body was palpable, like standing next to a radiator. She popped a pod in, pressed the button, and turned to the stove. "I'll make breakfast," she offered. "It's the least I can do since you slept on the floor like a golden retriever." Roman stiffened. "I do not sleep like a dog." "You were snoring," she lied. "Sit, I'm making eggs." Roman sat at the kitchen island, watching her. Chloe wasn't a chef. In fact, her culinary skills were mostly limited to reheating takeout and making toast. But she wanted to be useful. She cracked 4 eggs into the pan. Disaster struck immediately. The heat was too high. The butter browned instantly, and the eggs hit the pan with a violent hiss, turning rubbery and brown within seconds. Smoke rose. "Damn it," Chloe muttered, frantically scraping them. "I burned them. They're ruined." She went to dump the pan into the trash, but a large hand intercepted her wrist. The touch sent that familiar, prickling jolt of static up her arm, though it was milder today. "Do not throw it away," Roman said. "Roman, they're brown. Eggs shouldn't be brown. They look like shoe leather." "I am hungry," he said simply. He took the pan from her, scraped the charred, rubbery mess onto a plate, and sat back down. Chloe watched in horror as he forked a massive bite of burnt egg into his mouth. He didn't wince. He didn't gag. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and immediately went for another bite. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "I can make cereal." Roman looked at her. His gray eyes were soft, the pupils blown wide. "It is excellent," he lied. "Thank you." He ate every scrap. He even ate the piece of shell she had missed. It was terrifyingly domestic. It felt less like he was eating breakfast and more like he was performing a religious ritual because she was the one who had cooked it. Mr. Biscuits trotted into the kitchen, sniffed the air, looked at Roman's plate, and let out a judgmental yowl before walking away. "See?" Chloe said. Even the cat thinks you're a masochist." "The cat," Roman said, wiping his mouth, "has no taste." Chapter 12. The Touch. By early afternoon, the snow showed no sign of stopping. They were effectively trapped. The quarterly reports lay forgotten on a coffee table. To break the silence, Chloe had found a DVD player in the cabinet and a collection of movies that looked like they hadn't been touched since 2005. "We are watching National Treasure," she declared, "because Nicolas Cage is a national treasure." Roman, who looked like he would rather watch paint dry, sat on the floor with his back against the sofa. Chloe sat on the sofa behind him, wrapped in a blanket, with Mr. Biscuits curled up on her feet. Halfway through the movie, the atmosphere shifted. Roman wasn't watching the screen. He was tense, his head tilted back slightly, resting against the cushion near Chloe's knee. Chloe, bored by the heist scene, found her gaze drifting to him. His hair was messy today. It looked soft. Without thinking, driven by a calm she hadn't felt in years, she reached out. Her fingers brushed through the dark waves of hair at the nape of his neck. Roman stopped breathing. The reaction was instantaneous. The air in the room seemed to pressurize. A low, vibrating sound started in his chest, that same generator hum from the break room. Chloe froze. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't stop," Roman rasped. The words were a command, rough and desperate. She hesitated, then resumed the motion, her nails lightly scratching his scalp. The static hummed between them, but it wasn't painful now. It was a warm, golden current that made her toes curl. Roman's head fell back further, pressing into her hand. His eyes slipped shut. He looked like a man who had been walking through a desert for years and had finally found water. "You smell like vanilla," he murmured, his voice sounding drugged. "And ozone, and home." "Ozone?" Chloe whispered, her heart hammering. "Like the layer?" "Like the storm," he corrected, his eyes still closed. "You smell like the calm before the strike." His hand moved. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he reached back and wrapped his large fingers around her ankle, just above her sock. His thumb rubbed circles against her skin. The sensation was electric. Chloe forgot how to breathe. Roman turned his head slightly. His nose brushed against her knee. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering drag of air. His lips parted. He was inches from her skin. He looked like he wanted to bite her. Not in a playful way, in a consume way. "Roman?" she squeaked. His eyes snapped open. For a second, just a split second, they weren't gray. They were a burning, molten gold. He released her ankle as if she had burned him. He surged to his feet, putting the width of the room between them in a single stride. "I need wood," he said, his voice ragged. "For the fire." He stormed out the back door without a coat, leaving Chloe staring at the empty space where he had been, her ankle still burning from his touch. Chapter 13. The Vulnerability. Night fell, turning the windows into black mirrors. The wind howled against the logs, but inside, the fire roared. Roman had returned with enough firewood to build a fortress. He had been quiet since the movie, pouring them both glasses of expensive red wine he'd found in the cellar. They sat on the rug now, a safe distance apart. The wine was loosening Chloe's tongue. "I owe $42,000, she said suddenly. Roman looked up from his glass. He didn't look surprised. "Student loans?" "And medical bills," Chloe said, staring into the fire. "My mom got sick a few years ago. The insurance was garbage. She passed, and I inherited the debt. That's why I drive the heap. That's why I steal tea bags from the break room." She laughed, but it sounded wet. "I keep a ledger," she continued, pulling the small, battered notebook from her pocket. "Every penny I earn goes in here. I have a 5-year plan to be debt-free. Until then, I'm just surviving. Tread water, don't drown. That's the motto." Roman set his glass down. He looked at the notebook like he wanted to incinerate it with his mind. "I could write a check," he said quietly. "Right now. I could wipe it clean, Chloe." Chloe stiffened. "No." "Why? It is nothing to me, a rounding error." "Because I'm not a charity case," she snapped, tears pricking her eyes. I'm not one of your acquisitions, Roman. If you pay it, then I owe you, and I don't want to be another thing you own. She wiped her face aggressively with her sweater sleeve. The tears were coming now, ugly, hiccuping sobs that she hated. I just want to be safe. I want to know that if my car breaks down, I don't have to choose between fixing it and eating. Roman moved. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He shifted across the rug until he was kneeling in front of her. He reached out, his large hands cupping her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears. Look at me, he commanded softly. Chloe sniffled, looking up. You are not an acquisition, Roman said, his voice fierce. You are significant. Your safety is not a transaction to me. It is a necessity. He didn't offer money again. He just held her face, his forehead resting against hers. You are not treading water anymore, he whispered into the space between them. I have you. I will not let you drown. Chloe closed her eyes, leaning into him. For the first time in 3 years, the knot of anxiety in her chest loosened. She didn't feel owned. She felt held. Chapter 14. The Almost Kiss. The moment stretched. The fire crackled, popping loudly, but neither of them moved. Roman's hands were still cupping her face. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, exploring the line of her jaw. The tenderness was disarming, terrifying coming from a man who could snap a fountain pen like a twig. Roman, Chloe whispered. Her voice was barely audible. He pulled back just enough to look at her. The air between them was thick, heavy with that strange static. It felt like the room was pressurized. His gaze dropped to her lips. I should not be this close, he murmured. Arthur warned me. Who cares what Arthur says? Chloe breathed. Roman let out a choked sound. He leaned in. It wasn't a gentle motion, it was gravitational. Chloe tilted her head up, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to bridge the gap and erase the last of the distance. His breath ghosted over her lips, hot, smelling of wine and wood smoke. Chloe, he groaned. He pressed his forehead against hers again, his grip on her face tightening, his fingers tangled in her hair. If I start, he warned, his voice a low growl that vibrated in her bones. I will not be able to stop. Do you understand? I don't want you to stop. That broke him. Roman surged forward, but just before his lips touched hers, a spasm went through him. His entire body jerked. A sound ripped from his throat, not a moan, but a snarl, a legitimate animalistic snarl. Chloe's eyes flew open. Roman was staring at her, but he wasn't seeing her. His eyes were gone. The gray was completely swallowed by glowing iridescent gold. His pupils were vertical slits. His teeth, his canines looked longer, sharper. Roman? Fear spiked in her chest. He shoved himself away from her, scrambling backward across the rug like a man possessed. He crashed into the coffee table, sending the empty wine glasses shattering to the floor. Get back! He roared. The voice wasn't his. It was distorted, layered, deeper than anything human. He clutched his head, his fingers digging into his scalp. Get in the room, Chloe! Lock the door! What's happening? Are you having a seizure? Go! The command hit her with physical force. It wasn't a suggestion. Her body reacted before her brain did. She scrambled up and ran to the bedroom, slamming the door and twisting the lock. Through the wood, she heard the back door crash open, splintering on its hinges. She heard a heavy, wet thud of something landing in the snow. And then, a howl. Long, mournful, and terrifyingly loud. It tore through the night, echoing off the mountains. It wasn't a wolf howl. It was something bigger. Something ancient. Chapter 15. The Sighting. Chloe didn't sleep. She sat on the bed, wrapped in the duvet, clutching Mr. Biscuit so hard the cat wheezed. The howling had stopped hours ago, replaced by the relentless whistling of the wind. When the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the snow in shades of brutal pink and gray, the silence was absolute. I have to check, Chloe whispered. He might be hurt. He might be dead. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the nightstand, a weapon Clue would be proud of, and unlocked the bedroom door. The living room was empty. The back door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. The wood around the lock splintered outward. Snow had drifted into the kitchen. "Roman?" She stepped into her boots and grabbed her coat. She walked out onto the back deck. The snow was deep, undisturbed except for a chaotic trail leading toward the tree line. Chloe followed it with her eyes, and then she stopped. At the edge of the forest, standing in the shadow of a massive pine, was a beast. It was black as midnight, blending into the shadows. It was quadrupedal, canine, but the scale was wrong. It was massive, its shoulder height easily reaching her chest. Its eyes were glowing gold, watching her. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the candlestick. "Wolf," she whispered. "That's a wolf." The beast took a step forward. It didn't look aggressive, it looked guilty. It chuffed, a puff of steam rising from its snout. Chloe took a step back, her heel hitting the deck stairs. "Nice doggy, nice giant mutant doggy." The beast whined. It was the same sound Roman had made in the break room. The purr. Before she could process that, a voice called out from the side of the cabin. "Chloe!" She spun around. Roman was walking around the corner of the house. He was human. He was wearing sweatpants and nothing else, shivering violently, his skin pale and covered in snow. He looked like he had been dragged through a hedge backward. Chloe looked back at the tree line. The black beast was gone. Vanished. "Roman!" She dropped the candlestick and ran to him. "Where were you? I heard a howl. There was a wolf the size of a minivan." Roman caught her as she collided with him, his skin ice cold. He had evidently raided the emergency supply shed near the tree line. The sweatpants he wore were dusty and smelled of gasoline, but they covered him. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck. "I went for a run," he lied, his teeth chattering. "To cool off. I saw the animal. It's a stray, a wild dog. It lives in the woods." "A stray?" Chloe pulled back, looking at him incredulously. "Roman, that thing was bigger than the heap. It had gold eyes." "Light reflection," Roman said, steering her quickly back inside the warm cabin. "Snow blindness. It plays tricks on the eyes." He kicked the broken back door shut and shoved a heavy kitchen chair under the handle to jam it in place, since the lock was now useless. He looked exhausted, drained, and terrified. "It's gone now," he promised, looking her in the eye. "It won't hurt you, I swear it." Chloe looked at the splintered door frame. She looked at the scratches on Roman's chest that were already fading. She didn't believe him, not for a second. But she looked at his shaking hands and realized something else. He was terrified for her. "Okay," she whispered, lying through her teeth. "Just a stray dog." Chapter 16. The Return. The drive back to Chicago was suffocating. Inside the Land Rover Defender, the silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the windows. The only sounds were the hum of the heater, the rhythmic thump-thump of the tires on the slushy asphalt, and the occasional disgruntled hiss from Mr. Biscuits in the back seat. Chloe stared out the passenger window, watching the endless line of pine trees blur into a gray smudge. Her hand was resting on the door handle, knuckles white. She wasn't scared of Roman, at least, she didn't think she was. But she was scared of the lie. A stray dog. She replayed the memory for the 100th time. The beast at the tree line hadn't been a dog. It had been a monster. It had shoulders like a linebacker and eyes that glowed with an intelligence that was distinctly human. And then Roman had appeared, half naked in the snow, sweating and shivering, swearing it was nothing. "The heater." Roman's voice broke the silence, startling her. "Is it adequate?" Chloe looked at him. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. He looked exhausted. The circles under his eyes were darker today, and there was a tension in his jaw that hadn't relaxed since they left the cabin with its splintered back door. "It's fine," Chloe said. Her voice sounded thin. "I'm fine." You are clutching that handle like you expect me to drive off a cliff. Well, considering your fast and furious drift move on the way up, can you blame me? Roman didn't smile. He didn't even do that annoying, attractive half smirk. He just stared straight ahead. I am sorry, he said abruptly. About the cabin. The trip was unprofessional. Unprofessional? Chloe let out a short, incredulous laugh. Roman, you slept on the floor. I cried about my student loans. We almost kissed by the fire until you ran out into a blizzard to chase a stray dog. I think we passed unprofessional about 3 exits ago. Roman flinched. The muscles in his neck corded. It won't happen again, he said, his voice dropping to a flat corporate monotone. When we return to the office, we will resume a strictly employer-employee dynamic. I have transferred the overtime payment to your account. I added a discretionary hazard pay bonus. It should cover your debt. Chloe felt a sting in her chest. It wasn't a relief. It felt like rejection. Right, she whispered, turning back to the window. Strictly business. Got it. She pulled out her phone and checked her banking app. The balance made her eyes water. It was there. The $42,000 plus a generous per diem. She was debt-free. She could fix the heap. She could buy name-brand cereal. She should be ecstatic. Instead, she felt like crying. Thank you, she said stiffly. Don't thank me, Roman rasped, shifting gears with unnecessary force. Just stay safe, Chloe. Stay away from me, is what he meant. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When he dropped her off at her apartment building, he didn't get out to open her door. He waited until she was safely inside the lobby, then tore away from the curb with a roar of the engine that shook the glass doors. Chapter 17. The Jealousy. Monday morning at Gantry Capital felt different. The air in the office was colder, sharper. Chloe sat at her desk, still located in the corner of Roman's office, trying to focus on a spreadsheet, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty chair behind the massive mahogany desk. Roman was in a meeting with the legal team. He had been avoiding her all morning. No coffee, no sniffing the air when he walked in, just a curt nod and a closed door. Miss Bishop? Chloe looked up. Standing in front of her desk was a man she recognized from the company directory, Julian Vance, Senior VP of Acquisitions. He was handsome in a generic catalog model sort of way. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hi, Mr. Vance. Can I help you? I was hoping so, Julian said, leaning a hip against her desk. He invaded her personal space just enough to be annoying. I heard you survived a weekend at the Greystone estate with the big, bad wolf. That deserves a medal. Or at least a drink. Chloe bristled. Mr. Gantry was perfectly professional. I'm sure he was, Julian laughed. Roman is a monk, but you look like you need a break. How about dinner tonight? There's a new Italian place on State Street. Chloe opened her mouth to politely decline, but the office door slammed open. It wasn't a normal opening. The heavy oak door hit the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Roman stood in the doorway. He looked terrifying. His tie was gone. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they could crush stone. But it was his face that made Chloe's breath hitch. His eyes were storm gray, swirling with the darkness that made the hair on her arms stand up. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at Julian's hand, which was resting near Chloe's stapler. Get out, Roman said. It was a whisper, a low, vibrating command that seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. Julian straightened up, his charming smile faltering. Roman, I said, get out, Roman repeated. He walked toward the desk. Every step was deliberate, predatory. He picked up a plastic stapler from Chloe's desk, one she had been using to take notes. We were just talking about dinner, Julian said, trying to regain his composure. No need to be possessive, boss. She's just an assistant. Crunch. The sound was sickeningly loud. Roman hadn't just broken the stapler. He had crushed it. Plastic shards exploded onto the desk, and the metal internal mechanism was twisted into a pretzel in his fist. He dropped the wreckage onto the desk. "She is not just anything," Roman growled. The sound was deep, guttural, and absolutely not human. "Touch her desk again, Julian, and you will be typing with your nose." Julian turned pale. He looked from the twisted metal to Roman's face, then swallowed hard. I have a call. Excuse me." He practically ran out of the room. Roman stood there, his chest heaving, black ink dripping from his fist. He was staring at the door as if he wanted to rip it off its hinges and throw it down the elevator shaft. Chloe stood up. Her heart was pounding, but not with fear, with anger. "Are you insane?" she hissed. Roman turned to her, his eyes wide and wild. "He was touching your desk. He smelled like cheap cologne and desperation." "So you threatened to break his fingers? Roman, you can't just growl at people. This is a workplace, not a kennel." "I didn't growl." Roman lied, grabbing a tissue to wipe the ink. "I cleared my throat. Aggressively." "You crushed a hard plastic stapler with one hand!" "It was defective." Chloe marched around the desk, grabbed his uninjured hand, the clean one, and dragged him toward the private bathroom attached to the office. "Wash your hands," she ordered, "and stop scaring the VPs. If you fire everyone who asked me to dinner, you'll be running this company alone." Roman froze. He looked down at her hand gripping his wrist. "Are there others?" "Others what?" "Who asked you to dinner?" "No," Chloe admitted. "But that's not the point." Roman relaxed slightly. He let her drag him to the sink. "Good," he muttered, "because I'm running out of pens." Chapter 18. The Gala. The Gantry Capital annual charity gala was the kind of event that made the society pages. It was held in the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, a sea of crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and people whose jewelry cost more than Chloe's entire life earnings. Chloe hadn't planned on going, but yesterday, a box had appeared on her desk with a note. "Attendance is mandatory. Wear this. R." Now, she stood at the edge of the ballroom, feeling like an imposter. The dress was breathtaking. It was a deep, shimmering emerald green silk that fit her curves like liquid metal. It had long sleeves, a high neck, but the back was completely open, plunging dangerously low. It made her feel armored and exposed all at once. "Breathe, Chloe," she whispered to herself. "Don't trip. Don't spill red wine on a senator." "You won't trip." The voice came from directly behind her. Chloe turned and stopped breathing. Roman was wearing a tuxedo. If he looked dangerous in a suit, he looked devastating in a tux. The black fabric emphasized the width of his shoulders, the stark white shirt highlighting the tan of his skin. He had cleaned up since the pen incident, but the scar on his neck was still visible, a reminder of the violence underneath the polish. He was staring at her. He wasn't hiding it tonight. His gaze swept over the green dress, lingering on the open back, his eyes darkening. "You came," he said. "You said it was mandatory," Chloe replied, her voice shaky. "I lied." He took a step closer. The static hummed between them, buzzing against her skin like a physical caress. The noise of the party faded into the background. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. It wasn't a command this time, it was an offer. "I don't know how to waltz," Chloe admitted. "I'm more of a sway awkwardly kind of girl." "I'll lead," Roman said. "You just have to hold on." He held out his hand. Chloe took it. The spark was there, that jolt of electricity, but Roman didn't flinch. He laced his fingers through hers and led her onto the floor. He pulled her close, too close for a boss. His hand settled on the bare skin of her lower back. His skin was hot, calloused, and firm. Chloe gasped softly at the contact. They moved. Roman moved with a grace that defied his size. He guided her effortlessly, shielding her from the other dancers. "Everyone is staring," Chloe whispered, looking around. "Let them stare," Roman murmured, his chin brushing the top of her head. "They've never seen the king with his..." He stopped himself. "With his what?" "With someone who matters." He spun her slowly. The music swelled, something classical and aching. Roman leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. The sensation sent shivers racing down her spine. "You look incredible, Chloe," he whispered. "Not pretty, not beautiful. You look like survival. You look like the only real thing in this room." Chloe looked up at him, her heart aching. "Roman, I don't understand. One minute you're pushing me away, telling me to go home. The next you're looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're hungry." Roman's hand tightened on her waist. His eyes flashed gold, just a flicker. "I am starving," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I can't eat." Chapter 19. The Blackout. The gala ended at midnight, but Roman insisted they go back to the office to sign urgent papers before the Tokyo markets opened. It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. The office tower was silent. The city lights twinkled below them like a carpet of diamonds. Chloe was sitting on the couch in Roman's office, kicking off her heels. Her feet hurt, but she felt buzzed on champagne and the lingering adrenaline of the dance. "I should go home," she said, not moving. "Stay," Roman said. He was standing by the window, loosening his bow tie. "Just for a moment. The storm is coming back." He was right. Outside, heavy clouds were blotting out the stars. Suddenly, the building groaned. A massive boom of thunder shook the floor. And then, everything went black. The power grid failed. The lights died instantly. The emergency lights didn't kick on. Something had tripped the backup. The office was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. "Roman?" Chloe called out, standing up. "Stay where you are," Roman's voice came from the window. "Do not move." "I can't see anything." Chloe took a step forward, arms outstretched. Her foot caught on the edge of the coffee table. She pitched forward. Her shin slammed into the sharp glass corner of the table. A jagged pain shot up her leg. She cried out, falling hard onto the carpet. "Chloe!" She felt a warm wetness on her leg. She reached down. Sticky, metallic smell. "I think I cut myself," she said, her voice trembling. "It's bleeding." The silence that followed was terrifying. Then she heard a sound. It was a sharp intake of breath, a sniff, and then a growl. Not the low rumble she was used to. This was a wet, snarling sound, like an animal tearing at a leash. "Roman?" "Get out." Roman's voice was unrecognizable. It was strangled. "Chloe, get out of the room. Now." "I can't see. My leg hurts." "Run!" The roar was so loud it vibrated in her chest. Chapter 20. The Shift. The scent of blood hit Roman like a sledgehammer. It was sweet, copper-tangy, and overwhelming. It cut through his rationality, through his human mask, through 300 years of discipline. His inner wolf didn't see Chloe, the assistant, the woman. It saw mate, injured, blood, and then it saw need. The control snapped. "Run!" he screamed again, falling to his knees as his femurs snapped. The pain was blinding. It wasn't the magical fluid transformation of the movies. It was biology revolting against physics. His spine cracked, elongating with a sound like pistol shots. His jaw dislocated, stretching forward. His skin split as thick black fur erupted from underneath. Chloe fumbled for her phone. She turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. It landed on Roman, but it wasn't Roman. Chloe screamed. The thing on the floor was a nightmare. It was half man, half wolf, caught in the gruesome middle of the shift. Roman's face was distorted, his nose flattened into a muzzle, his teeth lengthening into serrated daggers. His hands were claws, scrabbling against the expensive carpet, shredding it to ribbons. He looked up at the light. His eyes were burning gold. There was no humanity left in them, just hunger. He snarled, saliva dripping from his jaws. He lunged toward her. Chloe didn't think. She didn't analyze. She reacted with pure, primal terror. She grabbed the heavy ceramic tape dispenser from the desk and hurled it at his head. It bounced off his snout with a clunk. The beast shook its head, sneezing. It paused for a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. Chloe scrambled backward, ignoring the screaming pain in her bleeding leg. She clawed her way to the door. "Get away from me!" she shrieked. "You monster!" She threw the door open and sprinted, limping, gasping, crying, down the hallway toward the stairwell. Behind her, she heard a sound that would haunt her nightmares. A howl. And then, the heavy, thundering sound of paws hitting the floor, chasing her. Chapter 21. The Terror. The stairwell was a throat of concrete and darkness, swallowing Chloe whole. She descended the steps 2 at a time, her breath hitching in wet, terrified gasps. She had left her heels back in the office, abandoning them when the lights died. Now her bare feet slapped against the cold concrete, slipping on dust and grit. "Ow!" she whimpered as her injured leg buckled. The cut on her shin, a jagged, ugly thing from the glass table, was throbbing with a hot, rhythmic pulse. She could feel the blood trickling down to her ankle, warm and sticky. "Don't stop. If you stop, he eats you." Above her, the heavy fire door slammed open. Boom! The sound echoed down the spiral shaft like a thunderclap. Then came the claws. Scritch, scritch, thud. The sound of something heavy and four-legged taking the stairs with terrifying speed. Chloe sobbed, aiming her phone's flashlight down the well. The beam shook violently, illuminating nothing but endless gray steps. "Go away!" She screamed up into the darkness. Her voice cracked, sounding small and pathetic against the echoing concrete. "Leave me alone!" A growl answered her. It wasn't angry, it was desperate. It was a low, whining keen that vibrated through the metal railing she was gripping. She didn't wait to interpret the nuance of wolf communication. She scrambled down another flight, her hand slipping on the railing. She nearly fell, catching herself at the last second, wrenching her shoulder. Flight 30. Flight 20. Flight 10. Her lungs burned, her legs felt like lead. The bleeding had slowed, but the pain was blinding. Behind her, the sounds changed. The heavy thud stopped. Chloe risked a glance upward. 2 floors up, leaning over the railing, were 2 burning gold eyes. They hung in the darkness like suspended lanterns. The beast was watching her. It wasn't chasing anymore. It was pacing the landing, whining, its massive black head lowered. It could catch her. She realized that with a jolt of cold clarity. It moved faster than physics allowed. If it wanted to tear her throat out, she would be dead already. "Why aren't you attacking?" She didn't stay to ask. She threw herself down the last 10 flights, bursting through the ground floor emergency exit. The cool night air of the alley hit her face. Rain was falling again, washing the sweat from her skin. She stumbled out onto the sidewalk, waving her arms frantically at a passing taxi. "Stop! Please, stop!" The cab screeched to a halt. The driver, a weary-looking man, took one look at her. Blood on her leg, green silk dress ruined, barefoot and shaking, and unlocked the doors without a word. Chloe dove into the back seat. "Drive!" she gasped. "Just drive! I can pay you with Apple Pay on my phone. Just please go!" As the taxi pulled away, she looked back at the glass doors of the Gantry Tower. Standing in the lobby, pressed against the glass, was a shadow. It was massive, filling the doorway. A black wolf, watching her leave, its forehead resting against the pane in a gesture that looked devastatingly human. Chapter 22. The Isolation. 3 days. Chloe had been holed up in her apartment for 72 hours. She had called in sick to Gantry Capital, leaving a voicemail that sounded like she was dying of the plague. Her apartment was a fortress of solitude and paranoia. The blinds were drawn. The deadbolt was engaged. Mr. Biscuits, sensing the mood, was currently hiding under the sofa, occasionally reaching out a paw to swat at dust motes. Chloe sat on the floor, surrounded by a chaotic nest of blankets. Her laptop was open in front of her. The search history was a testament to her deteriorating mental state. Chicago wolf sightings 2024. Can stress cause hallucinations of giant dogs? CEO. Eyes changing color liver failure? How to treat deep laceration without stitches. She looked down at her leg. She had cleaned and bandaged it with butterfly strips, ignoring the tube of burn cream Roman had given her in favor of actual Neosporin. It was healing, but it throbbed every time she walked. "I'm crazy," she whispered to the cat. "Mr. Biscuits, your mother has finally lost it." I saw a man turn into a wolf. That doesn't happen. That happens on HBO, not in an office building on Wacker Drive. But she knew it wasn't a hallucination. She remembered the sound of his bones cracking. She remembered the heat coming off him. She remembered the smell, that mix of ozone, pine, and wet fur. And she remembered the fear, not just hers, his. When she had screamed, the wolf had flinched. When she had thrown the tape dispenser, it hadn't attacked, it had sneezed. He wasn't hunting me, she realized, the thought landing like a stone in her stomach. He was following me. She wrapped her arms around her knees. She missed him. That was the insane part. She was terrified of the monster, but she missed the man. She missed the way he ordered her lunch. She missed the static. She missed the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room who mattered. He's a monster, she reminded herself aloud. He's a predator. You are prey. This is how the documentary ends, Chloe, with the gazelle getting eaten. A knock at the door made her jump so hard she nearly knocked over her water glass. Thump, thump, thump. It was a heavy, authoritative knock. Chloe froze. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy ceramic lamp shaped like a pineapple. "Go away!" she yelled. "I have the plague! It's highly contagious!"
"Open the door, Miss Bishop,"
a gruff voice called out.
"I have a tuna casserole. It's still hot, and I'm old. Don't make me stand in the hallway."
Chloe lowered the pineapple. She didn't know the voice, but it sounded irritatingly commanded, just like Roman's. She limped to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing there, wearing a grease-stained fisherman's sweater and holding a Pyrex dish covered in foil, was an older man who looked like a weather-beaten version of her boss. Chloe opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "Who are you?" "Arthur Gantry," the man grunted. "Mr. Gantry is my idiot son. Open up, the tuna is congealing." Chapter 23, The Intervention. Chloe opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "Mr. Gantry?" "Arthur," the old man corrected. "Mr. Gantry is my idiot son. Open up, the tuna is congealing." Chloe hesitated, then undid the chain. If Roman wanted to kill her, he wouldn't send his geriatric father with the casserole. Arthur bustled in, smelling of potting soil and old spice. He marched straight to her tiny kitchen, set the dish on the counter, and turned to look at her. His gaze was sharp, assessing. He looked at the bandage on her leg, the dark circles under her eyes, and the pineapple lamp she was still clutching. "Nice lamp," he grunted. "Very tropical." "I'm armed," Chloe said defensively, "in case you're a werewolf too." Arthur snorted. He walked over to the sofa and sat down, groaning as his knees settled. Mr. Biscuits, traitor that he was, immediately crawled out from under the couch and rubbed his face against Arthur's boots. "Of course I'm a werewolf," Arthur said, scratching the cat's ears. "We prefer the term shifter, but werewolf gets the point across. Although, at my age, I'm mostly just a tired old dog who likes naps." He looked at Chloe. The humor faded from his eyes. "You look like hell, kid. I saw my boss turn into a beast and chase me down 40 flights of stairs." Chloe snapped, tears pricking her eyes. "I think I'm allowed to look a little rough." "Fair point," Arthur sighed. He pulled a pipe from his pocket but didn't light it. He just held it, turning it over in his hands. "He wasn't chasing you, you know, not to hurt you." "He growled at me. He had teeth the size of steak knives." "He smelled blood," Arthur said simply. "Shifter saliva contains an enzyme. It accelerates healing. It also numbs pain. When he smelled your blood, his instinct, his wolf brain, overrode his human logic. He wasn't trying to eat you, Chloe. He was trying to lick your leg." Chloe stared at him. The image was so absurd, so weirdly domestic, that she almost laughed. "He wanted to lick me better?" "It's a pack thing. We take care of our own. And you," Arthur pointed the pipe stem at her, "you are his own. You have been since the moment he smelled you in that elevator." Chloe sank onto the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. "The mate thing. He told me." "It's not just a word," Arthur said softly. "It's an anchor. Without you, Roman is unstable. He's too strong for his own good, He needs a ground. You're the ground. I can't be a ground, Chloe whispered. I'm just a temp. I'm scared, Arthur. Good, Arthur said. You should be. It's a dangerous world. But let me ask you one question. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. In the 3 days you've been gone, has he come for you? No. Exactly. He's been sitting outside your building in his car for 72 hours. He hasn't slept. He hasn't eaten. He's just waiting. Because you asked him to leave you alone. Arthur stood up. A monster breaks down the door, Chloe. A man waits. Chapter 24. The Perspective. Arthur left 20 minutes later, leaving behind the casserole and a silence that felt different than before. It wasn't empty silence, it was thoughtful. Chloe sat on the floor, eating the tuna casserole straight from the dish. It was delicious, comfort food. A monster breaks down the door, a man waits. She thought about the last few weeks, the way he ordered her food because she was anemic. The way he slept on the floor to keep her warm. The way he drifted a 2-ton truck on ice to save her from hitting a deer. The burn cream, the student loans he offered to pay but respected her enough not to force. She looked at her leg, the wound was healing, but it was ugly, a scar. He wanted to heal it, she whispered to Mr. Biscuits. The cat blinked one eye at her, then went back to licking tuna off a fork. She stood up. She walked to the window and pulled back the blind just an inch. Down on the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, was the black Land Rover Defender. It was dark inside, but she could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just staring up at her window. He looked like a statue. A vigil. Chloe felt a crack in her chest, the wall of fear crumbling under the weight of something else, something warmer. He's an idiot, she said aloud. She went to her closet. She pushed past the sweaters and the jeans. She pulled out a dress. Not the green silk one, that was ruined, but a simple black work dress. Professional. Sharp. In the bathroom, she washed her face and applied concealer to hide the dark circles, brushing her hair until the frizz smoothed into waves. Finally, she grabbed her purse and the tube of burn cream.
Where are you going?
Mr. Biscuits seemed to ask with a meow. I'm going to work, Chloe said, grabbing her keys. I have a zipper to check. Chapter 25. The Choice. The lobby of Gantry Capital was quiet. The receptionist looked nervous. Everyone looked nervous. When Chloe limped off the elevator on the 50th floor, the atmosphere was funereal. The open-plan office was silent. People were typing quietly, heads down. Chloe? It was Marcus, the VP from her first day. He looked terrified. You're back? We thought you quit. I was sick, Chloe said, clutching her bag. Is he in? Marcus pointed to the double oak doors. He finally came back this morning, but he's locked himself in. He fired the cleaning crew for making too much noise. I wouldn't go in there, Chloe. He's volatile. Chloe nodded. Thanks, Marcus. She walked to the doors. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her hands were steady. She didn't knock. She pulled her master key card from her bag, swiped it, and pushed the door open. The office was a disaster zone. The curtains were drawn, plunging the room into gloom. Files were scattered across the floor. The expensive leather chairs were overturned. The air smelled of stale coffee, ozone, and misery. Roman was sitting behind his desk. He looked wrecked. He was wearing a spare white dress shirt he must have pulled from his office wardrobe, but it was unbuttoned, stained with coffee, and looked like he'd slept in it. He hadn't shaved. A dark shadow of stubble covered his jaw. His hair was a mess, as if he had been gripping it for hours. He was staring at the twisted plastic wreckage of the stapler he had destroyed earlier in the week. When the door opened, he didn't look up. Get out, he rasped. His voice was cracked, dry. I said no interruptions. Even for me? Roman's head snapped up. For a second, he looked like he was hallucinating. He stared at her, his eyes wide, rimmed with red. He took in the black dress, the hair, the bandage on her leg peeking out from the hem. Chloe? He stood up. He swayed slightly. You're here, he whispered. Why are you here? I work here, Chloe said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. And I have a lot of filing to catch up on. Chloe, stop. Roman held up a hand. It was shaking. Don't come closer. I am not safe right now. The control is thin. I know, Chloe said. She didn't stop. She walked right up to the desk. Arthur told me. He told me about the enzymes, about the licking. Roman flinched. A flush of dark color stained his cheekbones. He told you that? He said you were trying to help me, that you weren't hunting me. I terrified you, Roman said, his voice full of self-loathing. I chased you. You looked at me like I was a demon. I did, Chloe admitted. She reached across the desk. She placed her hand over his trembling fist. The static sparked, snap, but neither of them pulled away. I was scared, Roman. I'm still a little scared. You're a werewolf. That's a lot of paperwork to process. She squeezed his hand. But you waited. You waited outside my house for 3 days in the rain. Monsters don't do that. Roman looked at her hand on his. He turned his hand over, interlacing their fingers. He gripped her, hard, desperate. I would have waited forever, he whispered. Well, you don't have to, Chloe said. She walked around the desk. She stood in front of him. But you do have to promise me one thing. Anything. Next time I cut my leg, she said, a small tentative smile touching her lips. Use a Band-Aid. No tongues. Roman let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her into him, burying his face in her stomach, wrapping his arms around her waist. He held her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Deal, he breathed against her dress. Deal. Chapter 26. The Truth. The office was a tomb of silence, save for the ragged sound of Roman's breathing against Chloe's neck. He held her as if she were made of smoke, and he was afraid the slightest breeze would scatter her. After a long minute, Chloe gently pushed against his chest. Roman, I can't breathe. He released her instantly, stepping back as if burned. He looked down at her, his eyes scanning her face for fear. I'm sorry, I forget my strength. It's okay, Chloe said, smoothing the front of her black dress. She winced as she shifted weight onto her injured leg. Roman's gaze snapped to her shin. He saw the bandage peeking out from the hem. Without a word, the CEO of Gantry Capital, the alpha king of the Greystone Pack, guided her backward until she was sitting on the edge of the desk. Then he dropped to his knees between her legs. He didn't kneel like a man proposing. He knelt like a soldier reporting to his commander. He didn't care that his ruined dress shirt pressed against the black ink stain on the carpet. He reached out, his large hands hovering over her ankle, trembling slightly. May I? He whispered, looking up at her. Just looking. Chloe warned, her voice shaky. No enzymatic healing. Roman nodded solemnly. He gently lifted her leg, resting her heel on his thigh. He inspected the bandage with clinical focus, though his jaw was tight with suppressed rage at himself. I did this, he rasped. I caused this. It was a coffee table, Roman. Unless you are secretly a piece of IKEA furniture, you didn't do it. I frightened you. You ran. You fell. He looked up, his gray eyes bleak. Ask me, Chloe. Arthur said you had questions. Ask them. I will tell you the truth, no matter how much it damages me. Chloe looked down at him, this massive, powerful creature kneeling at her feet in erect office. The fear that had gripped her for 3 days finally evaporated, replaced by a strange, fierce affection. Okay, she said. Question 1. Do you eat people? No, Roman said immediately. Humans are chemically incompatible and morally off limits. Good, that's a relief. She paused. Question 2. Do you have fleas? Roman blinked. He looked genuinely offended. I have a skincare regimen that costs more than your car. No, Chloe, I do not have fleas. Chloe suppressed a smile. Question 3. If I throw a stick, will you chase it? Roman stared at her. His eyes narrowed. For a second, the predator was back, dangerous and proud. I am the king of the city, he growled low in his throat. I command armies. I do not chase He stopped. He saw the twitch of her lips. He let out a defeated sigh, resting his forehead against her knee. Only if you want me to. Chloe laughed. She reached down and ran her fingers through his messy hair. The static sparked, warm and familiar. I think we can skip the fetch, she whispered. Get up, Roman. You're ruining your pants. He stood, towering over her again, but the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the monster in the dark anymore. He was just a man who needed her. One more question, she said, turning serious. What happens now? Roman took her hand. Now, I court you, properly. No kidnapping, no wolves. Just dinner. Chapter 27. The Courtship. Properly apparently meant shutting down an entire Italian restaurant on a Friday night. Chloe sat at the best table in Lyons, feeling underdressed in her work clothes. Roman sat across from her. He had showered and changed in his private suite at the office, reappearing in a fresh charcoal suit that made him look less like a castaway and more like the billionaire he was. But he was still on edge. Every time a waiter approached with water, Roman's eyes tracked the movement. You're doing it again, Chloe murmured, picking up her menu. Doing what? The don't look at her or I'll bite you face. Roman picked up his wine glass. It is instinct. You are injured. You are vulnerable. My wolf wants to put you in a cave and sit at the entrance until you heal. Well, tell your wolf that I prefer risotto to caves. The dinner was normal, surprisingly so. They argued about movies. Roman had never seen Star Wars, which Chloe considered a crime. They talked about her cat. Roman was convinced Mr. Biscuits was a demon in a fursuit. When they left, it was raining again. They walked to the curb where the valet was waiting with the Land Rover. Chloe stumbled slightly, her injured leg seizing up in the damp cold. Before she could regain her balance, Roman was there. Allow me, he murmured. He didn't wait for permission. He swept her up into his arms, bridal style, as if she weighed nothing more than a pillow. Roman, Chloe squeaked, clutching his lapels. Put me down. People are watching. Let them watch, he said, his voice rumbling against her chest. He didn't move toward the car immediately. He just held her, standing in the rain. The static between them was buzzing like a live wire, heating her skin through her clothes. He looked down at her, his face serious. I have been alone for a very long time, Chloe, he said quietly. 300 years of noise and hunger, but when I hold you, it is quiet. It is the only time the world is quiet. Chloe looked at the scar on his neck. She traced it with her thumb. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered, but you really need to put me down or you're going to throw out your back. Roman smirked, a real, genuine smirk that reached his eyes. I assure you, Miss Bishop, my back is structural engineering at its finest. He carried her to the car, placed her gently in the passenger seat, and buckled her seatbelt himself. His knuckles grazed her hip. The air in the car suddenly felt very thin. To my place? He asked, his hand hovering over the ignition. Or yours? Chloe looked at him. She saw the restraint in his eyes, the desperate hope that he wouldn't have to spend another night guarding her from the street. Yours, she said. Mr. Biscuits will just judge us if we go to mine. Chapter 28. The Claiming. The penthouse at the top of the Gantry Tower was exactly what she expected. Glass, steel, and a view that cost millions. But it was cold. It felt like a hotel, not a home. Roman locked the door behind them. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed in the vast space. He didn't turn on the lights. The glow of the city below was enough.
Are you hungry?
He asked, loosening his tie. Thirsty? No, Chloe said. She was standing in the middle of the room, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "I'm not hungry." She walked up to him. She reached out and took the ends of his tie, pulling him down until their faces were inches apart. "I think we're past the small talk, Roman." Roman let out a groan that was pure animal. He grabbed her waist, lifting her up and walking her backward until her back hit the floor-to-ceiling glass window. "Chloe," he warned, his voice rough. "If we do this, the bond, it will be permanent. There is no going back. Once I mark you, you are mine, in every way that matters." "And you're mine," she countered, breathless. "Always." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was an explosion. It was 3 days of fear and 300 years of waiting colliding in a single moment. Roman's mouth was hot, demanding, devouring. Chloe wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her hands in his hair, pulling him closer. The static wasn't a spark anymore, it was a firestorm. Every place their bodies touched burned with pleasure. He lifted her, wrapping her legs around his waist. He carried her to the massive bed in the center of the room, laying her down like she was a holy relic, then following her down, covering her body with his. The clothes were discarded in a frenzy of buttons and fabric. When skin finally touched skin, the sensation was blinding. Roman shuddered, his forehead resting against hers, his pupils blown wide, a ring of gold bleeding into the gray. "You feel it?" he gasped. "The pull?" "I feel it," Chloe whispered. It felt like a tether snapping into place, hooking behind her ribs. The intimacy that followed was raw and unhurried. Roman worshipped her. He kissed the bandage on her shin. He kissed her palms. He moved with a restrained power that made her feel safe and completely overwhelmed all at once. When the crest came, it was shattering. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Roman shifted. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, right where the pulse jumped. His breathing was ragged. "Chloe," he whispered against her skin. "Let me keep you. Let me anchor us." She knew what he was asking, the mark. She tilted her head to the side, baring her neck. It was an act of total trust. "Do it," she whispered. Roman didn't hesitate. He bit down. It was a sharp, stinging pain that lasted for a heartbeat, followed immediately by a flood of endorphins, so potent, Chloe gasped. It felt like warm honey pouring into her veins. She felt him, his relief, his adoration, his fierce protectiveness flooding her mind. The bond sealed, the static settled into a steady, comforting hum. "Mine," Roman growled softly, licking the mark to seal it. "Yours," Chloe answered, closing her eyes. Chapter 29, The Integration. On Monday morning, Chloe Bishop walked into the Gantry Capital boardroom. She was wearing an oversized black cashmere turtleneck she had raided from Roman's closet, to hide the bruising bite mark on her neck. Belted at the waist to look professional. She walked with a slight limp, but her head was high. Roman walked beside her. He looked different. The tension that usually radiated off him was gone. He looked relaxed, powerful, and utterly terrifying, in a way that had nothing to do with anger. The board of directors was waiting, 12 men and women in expensive suits. When Roman entered, they didn't just stand, they lowered their heads. "Sit," Roman commanded, pulling out a chair for Chloe at the head of the table, to his right. Roman, one of the older board members, a man named Silas, spoke up. "This is a closed session. The assistant cannot be here." Roman didn't look at Silas. He looked at Chloe. He poured her a glass of water. "She is not the assistant," Roman said calmly. "She is the queen." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Silas paled. He looked at Chloe, really looked at her. He inhaled, his eyes widening as he caught the new scent clinging to her. Ozone, pine, and alpha. Silas stood up. He bowed, lower this time. "Apologies, my lady." Chloe blinked. She looked at Roman. He was smirking. "Did you just make the board of directors bow to me?" she whispered. "They are my pack." Roman whispered back. "You are my mate. They answer to you now." Chloe looked around the table. These were the people who had terrified her on her first day. Now they were looking at her like she held the nuclear codes. She cleared her throat. She tapped her fingers on the mahogany table. Right, Chloe said. Well, since I'm in charge, she pointed a finger at Silas. The coffee in the break room is sludge. We're switching to a dark roast. Local fair trade. Silas nodded frantically. Done, immediately. And, Chloe continued, gaining confidence, Fridays. I want casual Fridays. Jeans, hoodies. If I have to see another 3-piece suit before the weekend, I'm going to scream. Roman choked on a laugh. He covered it with a cough, but his eyes were dancing. And finally, Chloe said, looking at Roman, the alpha will stop growling at the IT guys. It creates a hostile work environment. Roman sighed, leaning back in his chair. I will attempt to comply. Good meeting, Chloe said, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me,
I have a cat to feed. Chapter 30. Epilogue.
1 year later. The elevator chimed. Chloe stepped in, shaking off the freezing rain. She was wearing a new coat, cashmere, a gift from Roman, but she still carried her beat-up tote bag.
Hold the door.
A hand blocked the sensors. Roman stepped in. He looked tired, but happy. He had spent the morning dealing with the merger and the afternoon arguing with his father, Arthur, about the proper way to install a catio on the penthouse terrace. Mr. Biscuits was now living the high life, spending his days swatting at birds from a screened-in fortress Arthur had built. The doors slid close, sealing them in the quiet metal box. Roman dropped his briefcase. He didn't wait. He pulled Chloe into his arms, burying his face in her hair.
You smell like rain,
he murmured, inhaling deeply. And peanut butter. I had a snack, Chloe laughed, wrapping her arms around his waist. She felt the solid warmth of him, the steady hum of the bond that was now as natural to her as breathing. She looked up at him. The old scar on his neck was still there, a jagged reminder of his history, but the one on her heart, the fear of abandonment, was gone completely. Are we going to Arthur's for dinner? She asked. He threatened to make lasagna. We have to, Roman groaned. If we don't, he'll come here, and he'll bring the pipe. He stepped back, smoothing her hair. He looked her up and down, his eyes darkening with that familiar heat. His gaze dropped to his own waist. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper, I believe my zipper is down. Chloe looked. It wasn't. It was perfectly secured. She looked back up at him. He was smirking, that arrogant, devastating smirk that had started all of this. Is it? She teased, leaning against the elevator wall. That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Gantry. Roman took a step closer, boxing her in. It could be a shared problem, if you wanted to help. The elevator dinged. Floor 50. Chloe reached out. She patted his cheek. Leave it down, she whispered, winking. Roman laughed, a loud, joyous sound that filled the small space. He grabbed her hand, interlacing their fingers, the static sparking bright and blue between them. Come on, Queen, he said, pulling her out into their kingdom. Let's go home.